time for another round of brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand with your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
I'm sure when you've thought of brand or investing in brand, doing a rebrand, anything branding, you've thought of, well, what's my return? What's going to be the return on my investment in this? And this is a common question. So you're not alone in this thought or pondering it or going, man, if I invest this much, like some of these companies, like it's $100 million they invest in a rebrand.
Simple phrase that we use that I think is just brings so much clarity to people when they ask about brand. Like, what is brand? Oh, is it a logo? No. Business is transactional and brand is relational. And leave it at that, because it is the business's relationship to its audience, right?
Yeah, and that kind of does go into going, okay, transactions, you can see a return. If you put in, $1,000 into something, into a transaction, into an investment, you can calculate a return on that.
Yeah.
And each market has their own calculations for that type of return, whether it's housing, whether it's the stock market. Yeah. You're looking at different metrics, different numbers to see that. And unfortunately, thanks to the internet and digital marketing and advertising, it's like everything has been boiled down to, okay, you spend whatever, a couple $1,000s on your advertising on Google
or whatever,
pay-per-clicks, and then you see, oh, well, this many impressions or this many views and then this many click-throughs, which actually, if you don't know, a lot of those impressions and things are extremely inflated based off of the bots and everything that Meta and Google have. So those are inflated off the bat. And so
they're not accurate.
No. And so looking at going, okay, well, what's my return on something like this that is transactional? You put money in, hopefully you get money out and back. And then brand being relational, it's like you're trying to almost compare two opposite worlds of things. It's kind of
apples and oranges. You can't.
Well, it reminds me of like even when electric vehicles first started coming out, and people were like, well, how does it compare to a gas vehicle? And it's like, well, you're dealing with two different forms of energy. Of course, an EV is going to have a totally different torque and startup versus a gas because it's burning differently. It's a totally different energy source.
Look at if you're listening to us right now and you have a romantic partner. If you're married or you have a partner or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, if you're in a relationship, there's investment to be made in that, right? There's investment of time, there's of doing stuff together, of all those things that come with being in a relationship. But you can't measure that. You can't if you've been married for 2 years versus 10 years, you can't look at it and go, well, in that 8 years, I've invested so much in, all these other things. I've invested my time and energy and money into this relationship. And guess what? Trust is up 28%. Physical touch is actually increased by 7%. On the downside, hey, argument success rate is down 12%. There's no hard data to gauge a relationship, a human, partnership, engagement, a relationship that way. But and you sense the deep value. I've been married 29 years now, and I can tell you right now, my marriage is deeper on a whole different level than it was when we celebrated our 10th anniversary. And if brand is the same way with your audience, a business's relationship to its audience, there's no data to really give you an answer of, well, here's the return on investment.
Yeah. And it's kind of, it really did hit because I was doing an interview and they're like, well, what's the return on brand? What would you say? And they come from a marketing standpoint and everything. And I just kind of very pithy said like, well, what's the return on a relationship? And it's kind of like, at what point are you you're adding all these things up. Okay, I spent this much on the date. Now I did this. Now what was my return on that? Or you're spending time with your kids, or you spent time taking them to the museum and spent money on that and did whatever it was, or on their birthday. And it's like, what's the value of these relationships? And then what's the return, which really goes into the transactional side of it, of like, what's the cost as well? So you can't compare the two things. Like value is in its own total like kind of stratosphere compared to cost and return. And so when you look at brand, like first you have to accept that brand is relational. Brand is a relationship. It's the accumulation of all these things we always talk about, and then someone's relationship that is built from that, and they create those associations with your brand. They start creating that relationship.
There's an emotional connection with the business through the brand.
Way more than just the transaction of them buying your item. And really, it's like if you are just transactional, then you're just a business, and you need to kind of step up your game a bit and start looking at going, okay, well, how do I get into that relational zone? How do I start building that? When I was like thinking about it, it is you think of like, okay, everyone has like a father for the most part. Like if you're alive, you have a dad.
One. Yeah.
You had a dad.
Whether
at
you
some
have
point.
one in your life or had
And,
one.
And whether your dad died when you're young, or you still have your father, or your dad left, or end up in prison, or whatever it is, right? This idea of father, everyone has that. And whether it's a sliver of a memory that, oh, he left when I was 3 or 4.
I never knew my dad.
Never knew my dad, or whatever it could be. It's like there's still that perception of a father figure. So it's the same thing with like business and brand. It's like, yes, there is that. There's a relational perception of going, okay, what does this business mean to me? What has it offered me? What has it sold me? Or even what does it stand for? And so people are going to start conjuring up what that is because it's an entity in their life, and being able to go, okay, there is that relationship there, whether it's a lack of relationship or it's an abundant relationship that they go, man, I love this brand or I love this business.
There are things, for instance, like when in some of our case studies where we will look at, a client will rebrand with us and make a certain investment into that rebrand because we're not trying to toot our horn, but because we're good at what we do, obviously their business, there's an impact on their business in a positive way. So maybe their sales went up 23% in the first 6 months. Who knows, right? After a rebrand. But that isn't hard data that you can rest on to justify the investment, right? Because there's other factors that come into play. How's the rest of the economy going? Where's the shifts in the market sector in general that you reside in?
And in the advertising and marketing world, there's a bit of an awakening happening of going, okay, there's an author named Les Bennett. He's been in advertising world for like 40 years, and he wrote about the long and short of it. And that's about like going, okay, is it the short-term activities of advertising and marketing that drive results, or is it the long-term benefits of brand that really drives results? And over all this time, like he's kind of come back around where now it's like, actually the long of it is actually the heavyweight in the world of it, is that the long of it is what proves all the results in the long run and in the short term, because it makes the advertising and marketing more effective. And even Rory Sutherland has said things about, okay, why are we judging things like brand on short-term results when it takes years to build brand? And that's part of the issue, is that with technology, like I was saying earlier, is like you have these attribution errors of going, okay, well, we increased sales by this much, so it must be this. And of course, people are trying to protect their jobs and take credit for things and do things like, well, that's because John over in marketing did this, or in advertising he had this ad that he ran, campaign on Facebook, and they're all trying to protect their jobs. And it's like it becomes ridiculous at a certain point, because we live in such a world where everything, it's multi-touch. You're seeing an ad here, you're seeing an ad there, you see the brand maybe in the physical storefront. So you can't really draw attribution anymore. But that's kind of where this conclusion comes, is like, okay, if everything, all of that is relationship, all of that is the relational kind of aspects that's building into the brand. So the brand is the crux of it. And not investing in that is actually creating huge opportunity costs where you're missing out on the majority of this, and you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Because you get so focused on these numbers and so focused on going, okay, if I move these levers, what's going to actually help us? And a good example actually recently of that was Amazon for Prime Day this year. They increased their Prime Day to like Prime Week or something. And
like Black Friday month.
And so they did that thinking, okay, we're going to absorb more sales, right?
Yeah.
And it actually kind of backfired, because Walmart kind of fought back a little, and they ran some sales during Prime Day, which I think they do that every year. But it actually drew more sales over to Walmart because Prime Day was extended. So people actually, they didn't just buy, they shopped.
They had more time. They knew it wasn't like I've got to, if I'm going to pull the trigger, I've got one day to do it. They have I got a couple days. So before I can wait a day and maybe see if I can get it a little bit cheaper.
Right. So it backfired in the sense of, Amazon always does have those, day deals or whatever, and it has the countdown and all of that. And that really did drive that scarcity of time. So people would purchase. And then this allowed them to go, okay, maybe I'll shop around a little. And then Walmart, because Walmart actually hasn't raised prices like they said they wouldn't. So they've actually, stuck their ground on that. And Amazon increased pricing a little due to tariffs. And Walmart won out, where Walmart actually won from Prime Day. So ironically, Prime Day kind of probably primed the customers and made them think of going, oh, maybe I will buy that new whatever. And then they shopped around, and then they went to Walmart. So
Prime Day for Walmart.
And just like we said, multiple episodes ago about Walmart made the stance with the tariffs of going, no, we're not going to raise pricing. We're going to stick to it. We're going to fight this. And that was part of their brand because that's their whole ethos as a brand, and they stuck to that. And guess what? Now that won.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is if Walmart had just focused on their business, that wasn't a smart. I mean, looking at it from a business, you would be like, why are you doing that? Right?
Yep.
You're sticking your guns. You're going to decrease your profits because your costs are going up, right? Due to the tariffs. So from a business model, it would have been like, no, let's not do that. But they approached it with the lens of the brand, and that's where I think that strengthened their brand, which therefore helped the business.
Well, and I think that's the counterintuitive part of it. Just like a relationship, why would you spend that much taking your spouse out on a date or taking your kids to whatever it is, and all you're getting out of that is a memory that you could lose at some point? But why?
Hey, I'm not that old.
So like, and that's why like relationships are counterintuitive. Why would you do that? What's the right? And even you look at social events or social engagements or things that are fleeting, and then that's where these brands are even having to learn with the experience economy is that people are paying for experiences, these fleeting, intangible things, because of the relationship, because of the experience. And Walmart made that great move, and now they kind of harvested some of the rewards from that.
Yeah. And that's the thing you got to think about too. I mean, I think of it like, since we were talking about relationships and partners and marriages and stuff, but it comes to mind that whole idea of like on a first date, or when you're just dating someone, right? But when you're talking about a more of an ongoing relationship, think of it in terms of like, for instance, like you said, what's the point of, why invest in romancing your wife? And I think that's where a lot of marriages struggle, is because they kind of feel like, oh, well, they did all the romancing when they were dated. Now that they're married and the ring's on the finger, they don't have to do that anymore. And that's right. I don't know anybody that's still happily married that doesn't still go out on date nights or still doesn't want some of the love languages like gifts or physical touch or words of affirmation, those types of things that help nurture the relationship. So think of it with the terms of like with romance, where like with a brand, it boils down to selfless giving. And we've talked in previous episodes about when a brand goes out of its way, that maybe is not part of the actual transactional sale, but they are willing to invest in little touch points that engage with the customer, that add a little extra value and added value to the customer. That's the brand is coming from a standpoint of, we're not getting anything else out of this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that taps into like one of my favorite things, the whole lifetime value thing, is that if you can convert your thinking from transactional thinking to lifetime value thinking of going, oh no, it's okay for me to either, help this customer out in this moment for this single transaction for the lifetime value of them, right? For that relationship, then it's okay to lose a couple bucks here and there, but it's for the relationship, right? Yeah. And even like with clients, like after we help them with their rebrand and transform everything about them, then if they do come to us, go, okay, I need this little thing. It's like, no, that's part of the relationship. We'll take care of them and help them out with something. We're not going to nickel and dime them every single time there's like something that comes up. But it's like, no, we've built this thing. We've birthed this thing together. Now let's take care of it and make sure it's being raised properly. And it's like, I think that's where you're seeing this huge shift of not just focusing on the transactions. It's like, yes, you need to have transactions to keep the business alive, but the lifetime value is what matters. And that's that retention. That's that relationship that's there.
That's why, a family of 4 going to Disneyland will drop, sometimes, 1,000 or more just between the gate admission, food, things like that, souvenirs. What's the return on that investment? Well, I'll tell you what it is for a family of 4. That is shared experiences. That is, like you said, memories, deep, rich memories, right? But those shared experiences, and from a brand standpoint, that comes down to your engagement. Yeah. With your customer, how the brand is engaging with the audience, how the brand is sometimes not even proclaiming tooting its own horn, but sharing a passion that the business has or the brand has that is a shared passion with the audience. It's an indirect engagement. Doesn't have to be a direct engagement. It can be an indirect engagement.
And it's like those active investments along the way. So when someone thinks of branding, they think of logo, signage, merchandise, brochures, yada yada yada. And yes, that's the active investment part of it. That's you doing the dishes. That's you taking out the trash. That's you buying a gift. That's you giving your spouse a massage or whatever. Like those are the active engagement. But you're not doing those things and going, okay, well, what's going to be my return on this brochure, or actually doing a nice sign on our storefront? What's my return on that? It's like, okay, have fun calculating that, because you're going to be chasing your tail the entire time, because it's like it's a wild goose chase at a certain point, because those things are investing in the relationship. They are active investments into the relationship. And like what Scott's saying is that then in all these areas where they may just even associate with your brand or think of it or have it on their radar, and those are little moments here and there that actually help create that relationship and those memories and that association.
To really, I mean, and just even to sum it up, it's just that the simplicity of it is that, a business's return on their investment is the brand. It's not that brand has an ROI. It's that the brand is the ROI.
Yeah.
That is the return on investment. All the little things that you're doing, the brand is that return on investment.
Yeah, and actually that makes me think, you wouldn't believe how many people I've talked to where I'm almost having to be a therapist, because they are either the marketer, designer, or someone who is brand minded in a company, and they're going, well, my executive team or the owner, the boss, the founder, they don't get it. They don't understand. They're wanting a bottom line number. They want a return on this. They don't want to invest. They don't want to make the move to do this. So how do I do that, right? And seriously, send them this episode and tell, like, let us do the
send it to them. Thank us later.
and it's like helping them. We can walk them through and go, no. There's not an ROI to brand. Brand is the ROI because of these reasons. And there's proof to show that. It's like, even if you look at the S&P 500 or the stock market in general, the highest performing historically are the ones with the better brands. Now you could math that up and be like, okay, there's maybe some attribution error here, or it's a coincidence, maybe not. But also McKinsey has done reports where these well-branded companies typically outperform. So it's either, the chicken or the egg in a lot of those situations. Yeah. But, like, seriously, we want to be able to kind of be your advocate, as I know it can be frustrating to be trapped in a company like that where they may not get the vision that you're trying to do. You may be new to the team and you just feel like you're hitting this glass ceiling or just hitting your head against the wall.
Yeah. When I think about like my marriage, we're celebrating our 29th this year. How's the value? What was the return on investment of years since our 10th anniversary? And a lot of it too is personal growth. I've grown as a person. My wife has grown as a person, and we've grown together. We've gotten through some of those growth spurts of us individually, and that has deepened the marriage. That has deepened the relationship. And it makes me think of same thing with like a brand, where a brand as a market or the consumer shifts and grows, right? Or changes, evolves. The brand as well is doing it. And that's where you have that mutual growth or mutual evolution, mutual change that coincides together. And when you have customer retention, then there's where you're deepening that relationship. It's on a deeper level.
Even Nike's done that. You've seen this shift where they did a campaign not that long ago. I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about it, but the campaign before was like, winning is everything. And it was just like the most like very testosterone driven, like just competitive ad. Winning is everything. And then now they just had a very successful campaign with the golf pro who just won the championship, or whatever you call it. I don't know golf, so I'm probably using the wrong terms, but it's a picture of him, on the green, and he's there with his son, and his son's kind of grabbing the golf club, and it says just in plain text next to him, "You've already won," period. And
yeah, that's powerful.
And you see this shift where, and that's what they're making this point in this podcast, because the podcast is about balancing kind of efforts and not being too like achievement oriented. And they were saying how this shift in maybe the mindset of the market, right, is that Nike has a pulse on it where they see, okay, yes, it was this competitive, just, burn all the boats, just push yourself, stay up all night, work. And now is the market shifting where you get people where they're trying to balance life. They're trying to go, hey, winning's great. It's great to do your best and apply yourself, but it's not everything. Like, you've already won. And Nike, being an athletic company, it's interesting to see them kind of start introducing that narrative, which they probably are getting that pulse from the market.
At the end of the day, you have a brand whether you like it or not. And the question is, what's the pulse of the brand? How is the brand doing? How is the brand being perceived by the market that you're in, by your audience, by your customer? Your business will benefit from it. There will be a return on that investment, and that is a better brand to benefit the business.
Yeah, and if you need to send this to someone, and if you just feel stuck or you're hitting the head against the wall, send them some brandy and let us
Send them some brandy.
Let us convince them otherwise.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
for listening.
Cheers.